Oh, yes. Don't adjust that screen. Don't adjust that podcast app. It is actually a Snow the Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, the People's Podcast, Players Podcast, Prognosticators Podcast, Pedialyte Podcast, the only Flyers podcast. We're back. It has been a while. That's my fault. But we are here, and we are ready to get into your team, your town, the Philadelphia Flyers. They released their quarter-century teams. We talked about it a little bit earlier this week on the Press Row Show, but we're going to get to that. Perhaps propose some of our own. We did get a few submissions from the listeners out there. The show is not live, so if you are in the live chat, you are more than welcome to engage with one another. We are recording the show at an undisclosed time at undisclosed locations, our houses. And we do have a plan. We are waiting on confirmation, but we do have a plan to bring the show every two.
We have a confirmation.
Well, okay. We have an agreement in place that we'll be doing Snow the Goalie every Tuesday from now through the end of the season. So we will be able to provide all of you with a consistent schedule. It is something that we have taken to heart, that we, quite frankly, this is mostly my fault. Ant took blame for the earlier part of the season, and I'll take the blame from that point on. Bundy has been an absolute beaut. None of it is his fault. But we are going to give you every Tuesday a regular Snow the Goalie on top of all of the Press Row shows and anything else that comes up between now and the end of the season. So, with all of that out of the way, let me welcome to the show the guys who you are really here to hear from. And that, of course, is Anthony SanFilippo, who you can find on Twitter at AntSanPhilly, and none other than that absolute beaut himself, Bundy, Chris Therien, on Twitter at CTherien6. Gents, how are we doing today?
Go ahead, Ant. Oh, you want me to go first? Okay, I'll go first. Doing good. Doing good. TikTok got banned. See that?
Is it official?
Did it really? Yeah, Supreme Court 9-0. That's what I was in the middle of working on right before I.
Is it down or is it going down in a couple of days?
Sunday. Well, so it doesn't go down. Basically, what ends up happening is anybody who is a current user can continue to use it, but there will no longer be updates to the app. So eventually, it won't work. No new users can download. No updates unless it is sold.
Kevin O'Leary. I saw Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful.
I saw that. I did see that, yeah. I have a feeling it's going to get saved, guys. I do.
Mr. Beast also offered to buy it.
Oh.
Yeah, I saw something on that, too. Yeah. So.
My wife was telling me last night that apparently a bunch of TikTok creators have actually gone and, downloaded the direct, Chinese version of TikTok. I forget what it's called.
Yeah, it's called red line or red.
Yeah, they're doing it out of protest against the U.S. government. So instead of continuing to create content for what many consider to be perhaps a Chinese data collection thing, they're just saying, the hell with it. You have enough of my information already. Here you go. We'll just put the bank account in and everything. Pay me.
Yeah.
Go figure, guys. It's a crazy world we live in. But we have been growing the Snow the Goalie account over on TikTok, so hopefully if they don't kill it off, we'll be able to bring that back. The YouTube channel continues to grow, Instagram as well. So despite the fact that we have been somewhat irregular, kind of like an elderly man's bowel movements, we are here and we are ready to break down the Philadelphia Flyers. Guys, I don't know where you want to start. We could go back to the Ryan Poehling hit, which seems to still have Flyers fans worked up from last night's game. We could go a little bit more macro here, talk about the goalie situation. We can get into the quarter-century teams. Where do you want to start today?
How about I start with a rare Anthony hot take?
All right.
This Philadelphia Flyers, and this take has a lot more to do with the rest of the NHL than it does with the Flyers themselves. But if the Flyers had a goalie like they had at the beginning of last year in Carter Hart, they would be a lock of a playoff team this season. They are better as a team minus goaltending. Take goaltending out of it. But you talk about the skaters on the ice. They are better than the 5 teams in front of them currently in the Eastern Conference standings. They're just better. And they would be
playing better.
Yeah. Sure. Talent-wise, maybe not. But they play a better game. They play a better style. They play a game. They're not in the top 6 in the East. They're certainly not. But could they be 7? Yeah. Yeah, they could. Columbus is currently 7. Could they be better than Columbus? Yes.
Wouldn't it be funny if we find out if we look down at the end of the year, middle of April or whenever before the playoffs, and it was the Anaheim game that spurned them, right? Like that got them right off the runway. That would just be, I mean, that would almost be childish in a sense, but appropriate. Like it took that game to get the fire lit, and they haven't lost. Well, they lost to Columbus, but they've gotten points in every game since then.
Correct.
They dominated the Islanders in that second period for sure. I mean, like it was looked like men against boys. And you're right, Anthony. Like, yeah, I hate to like look or pin up the blame on one player because it's a team sport. But man, if their goaltending was up, getting that one save extra a game we talk about, I have no doubt they'd be in the top 6 in the East right now. Just the way their teams played. Now, I'll tell you one thing. It doesn't mean the team will play exactly the same year after year. This is what's happening this year. Right. But Anthony's right. And if they had a goaltender or if they had, a semblance of a guy that can make that critical save, I agree with Anthony. They'd be right there.
I mean, if you look at the standings, I mean, look, Washington's been a bit of a surprise, I think, for the entire league this year. I don't think anybody saw them as the best team in hockey. And they have currently the best record in hockey. The Devils, we knew they would be back. Carolina's Carolina. And then over in the Atlantic, Toronto, they just needed a coach. They got one in Berube. Florida's the defending champ. Tampa's Tampa. So you kind of knew those 6 teams were going to be there. But the rest of the Eastern Conference is just mediocre to bad. Just mediocre to bad. Excuse me. And I think the Flyers play the best team game of all of those mediocre to bad teams.
I totally agree.
Difference is the Flyers don't have goaltending. And that's not a knock on Sam Ersson. Sam Ersson's probably a very good number 2 in this league. I just don't think he's a number 1. Fedotov's been better the last 3 games, but it's 3 games. Let's not get, overjoyed with it. And Kolosov's probably needs time in the AHL. And so really that's really where you're at. And so without a number 1 guy, they're not a playoff team. And I find it interesting, Bundy. We talked about this. We didn't talk about this on air, but we talked about it off air. There was a report that came from Elliot Friedman a week and a half ago, about the Flyers kicking tires on John Gibson with Anaheim. Mm-hmm. He said, "Well, why would they be interested in John Gibson? Like, how is that a fit?" And maybe when you look around the league and you see just how bad the Eastern Conference is, and you go, "We're a playoff team with a goalie."
Yeah.
And they play everybody hard. They play everybody tough. You can win in the playoffs too that way. Like you can. It's crazy to say, but you can.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. If you could just get in, you just never know what's going to happen. I know Russ is smirking right now, but I'm being dead serious. I've seen enough lately.
I know. I'm just
like, I mean, there's some teams like, listen, the New York Islanders. Holy Jesus. If I look at the teams right now and I say, who would I rather be? I would rather be the Flyers right now than the Islanders in terms of team and structure and everything that's gone into it. Everything. Yeah.
And the Islanders have some players. Like they have some good players on that team.
They do. Very, very, very poor structure. If you look at the goals that were scored last night against them, really bad. Really, really bad. They skate in on plays. They don't stop and start. That's how a lot of the goals were started. The Flyers just totally picked them apart for most of the rest of the game after the first period. But, man, I'll tell you what, you're right, Anthony. They got some good players like Barzal,
Anders Lee,
Brock Nelson. Yeah, I mean, they got a
Horvat.
Yeah, Bo Horvat, Travis Konechny's cousin. Yeah, so I mean, but they just can't seem to put it together. Just can't do it.
No. That's an example, Bundy, where if you sat there and said, if I had to say which team has more talent, the Islanders probably have more talent than the Flyers.
Probably.
Certainly have more top-end talent.
Top-end talent, right?
Yeah.
But the Flyers play a better team game. And so therefore the Flyers are better.
Yeah. And and this is the Torts effect. So if you want to know what the Torts effect is like, this is full swing Torts effect right now. Team that's not as talented, he's got them firing on all cylinders right now, and they're playing great hockey because they're playing a team game. They're playing a team game, and that's what's happened. And that's the Torts effect. So whether you like him, in terms of what he's able to do for your team, I only have high praise for him. I really do. I can't say he hasn't done a good job. He's done a great job. I mean, in terms of what he has to work with and where this team is, again, knocking back on the door of the 8th spot again, it's impressive work by John Tortorella, and it's impressive work by the team to buy into what he's selling. The only thing I'll tell you is you could take the same team back with the same exact coach in another year, and it might not be the same team.
Sure.
Just to let you know, that's just this is not written in concrete.
And I'll say this, barring a trade for a goalie, let's imagine things just kind of stay as they are. They're still not making the playoffs because of the goaltending situation. And their schedule is not very forgiving. Once again, the Flyers get a couple tough stretches in the second half of the season. I mean, I look at the fact that they got to play the Devils 3 times in 2 weeks. Like, that's not good. And that's really the only tough part of January. Other than that, there's winnable games. Detroit, the Islanders 2 more times, the Rangers. Like, those are winnable games. And then, right before the break, you got to go Colorado, Utah on the road, and then come home and play Washington. That's not going to be easy. But once again, last year it was
games, they have some pretty.
Last year it was in March, and again it's going to be in March this year. Yeah. The difference is this year they got a lot of them at home. But Winnipeg, Calgary, Winnipeg, and then you get Seattle, who they can beat. You get the Devils, Ottawa, who you're in the mix with, right? But they're probably better than Ottawa. Tampa, Carolina, Tampa, Washington, Dallas, and then a break against Chicago, and then Toronto. Like, I mean, the schedule gets brutal in March again. So without a goalie, without a number 1 goalie, I still don't think they make it. But if they had one, this is a playoff team.
Does that change the trajectory though, Anthony, of what they're trying to do? Right? You got a lot more salvageable players.
Well, I think some of them are salvageable. Not all. I still think there are guys that probably need to still get moved out of here. Look, Farabee had a really good game last night, right? I think he played really well.
He did.
First game back after being a healthy scratch for 3 games, right? I think he played well. I still don't know that this is a good fit for him with Tortorella and the way towards coaches the team wants the team to play. I think Farabee's a decent player who can succeed somewhere else. And so, maybe in the long run, is he a good fit for here? No. Is he a good player that teams might be interested in? Sure. So a guy like that, I look at and say, that's not like a veteran player that you want to move off of. He's still kind of young. But at the same time, it's like, all right, might not be the right fit. So but I do think there are guys that you look at and go, oh, okay, maybe we can work something here. Hey, look, I don't get caught up in the Morgan Frost hot streak, right?
Well, it's the second half of the season. It's Morgan Frost season.
It's 4 games in a row.
He eats in the second half, and he likes to eat against bad teams. So
4 games in a row, he's played well.
Yeah,
he's played well, Russ. I can't take anything away from Morgan Frost. He's putting points on the board.
Yep,
he's playing really well.
And Konechny has been sensational.
He has.
He has been. Yes.
He's been sensational.
He has more than lived up to the hype of the contract. And it's really tough for a guy, especially after you get the term and you get the money, and there's a perception out there that it could have been an overpay. You go out and you perform at the level that he has. He has lived up to it. There is, once again, that case that can be made about, there were a lot of fans who thought that maybe he would have been a guy who could have been considered to get the C on the sweater. Assuming he continues to play at this level, no one ever seems to know what will happen long-term with Sean Couturier. Is there a scenario where he could eventually get the C? He is pretty much the perfect kind of Flyers player. Him being able to show up in big moments, it's not like he's just doing this against bottom-feeding teams.
He's right there now. Like
all year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He's top 10 in the league in scoring, guys. I don't know if you realize that. He's tied for 10th in the league in scoring with 53 points. It's pretty impressive.
He has had a great season. There is no getting around it. Can I just really quick, I just for the sake of making sure that we're doing due diligence here, you mentioned the possibility of trading for a goalie, Ant.
Yeah.
Everyone is going to know how I feel about it, so I don't need to say it. But what percentage chance would you put it that Danny Briere, in the midst of year 2 of the rebuild, seeing where the team is, seeing that they are kind of in that pack of, it's still a very tight group between the second worst odds and like, let's say the 8th or 9th worst odds, and also theoretically having a chance to make a playoff run, I guess, or be a bubble team, what percentage would you put it that Briere is going to essentially abandon rebuild year 2 to chase a playoff spot by going and getting a goalie? Because to be clear, that's the only reason that you would go out and acquire a goalie. You have enough guys in the system. So what are the odds?
I still think it's way too early to make a determination on that, in all honesty, because I think it's one of those situations where he's looking at it and saying, okay, look, if we're there at the deadline, we can be a playoff team. We can go get a goalie. And that's maybe what he looks at as a possibility. You still got a ways to go before you get to that. You still got to play another 12 games.
Yep.
And if you're chasing, if you're still 4 points out at that point, you're probably not doing it. You know, you're
think
probably
that they would need to be like in the 8th spot or like
Yeah,
the 9th spot in order to
right
justify
there.
it?
They need to be right there and not have to climb over 5 team or 4.
I will. I'll never forget Gar Snow when he was GM of the Islanders. This is going back like 15 years ago. They won like something like 9 out of 10 games at some point in the schedule, and they were behind. Like they were like where the Flyers were, let's say, right? And I remember he told me, he goes, "Yeah, we made up like 2 points." That's exactly what he told me. That's how hard it is to cover ground when you're down. So, you know, the problem is with the Flyers is that they do play a very good team game. Like they come at you in waves. They're defending up the middle of the ice. They're doing a great job defensively in their zone. But the one thing that you can't really control is the nights you play well and you still lose. It doesn't go your way. And there's been a lot of those nights for this team this year where, you know, their goaltending had let them down, or a bad goal, or they deserved far better in the game and they ended up losing. The Columbus game was a good example of that a couple games back, losing overtime. They deserved a lot better in that hockey game than they got. I'll be honest with you, it's been a while since I've seen a team that's achieved as much as they have in terms of the way they play the game, how hard they play the game, and they struggle for results. And that's tough. That's tough. But Danny and Jones, you're going to have to figure out what they want to do. I mean, Anthony, again, you'd know better than me or get more information, but I can't imagine them getting a John Gibson. Like, I don't know if it's just for 1 year. I mean, it seems like if you watch Gibson play last week against us, man, you know, that was not a very good showing.
There's also the team in front of it too.
Bad, I understand, but they're you know, but it's funny, they're not the worst team in the league. Like they've actually have some wins. They
I don't know how.
I have no idea how either, because we saw a really bad version of Anaheim here in Philadelphia last week.
Mm-hmm. I thought we saw a bad version of them when the Flyers played out there last month too. Like I thought I watched it
and somehow got worse.
Yeah, well, the Flyers obviously want to play them. They like playing them because of the Cutter Gauthier situation. I'm sure gets them all riled up. But you know, it's a tough schedule, like Anthony said, a busy schedule, and you know, how are you going to do that? The problem is the Flyers are playing really well right now, and everybody's kind of amped up a little bit. Problem is, what happens when you accidentally go out and just lose 3 games in a row, right? Yeah. And you're playing well.
I mean, when they had 8 games in 15 days to start March.
Yeah, I know.
Like, who's playing in goal? Who's playing in goal? Like, you can't rely on one guy to play most of those games, right? So that's what I'm trying to say. It becomes a problem.
Yeah.
So
I mean, like we all know where I stand on rebuild and not. If this team somehow, like, say they don't make a deal for a goalie, I do still hold very firm in the belief that like there should be at least 1 or 2 trades made by the deadline. There just should be. Like because the same way that you can look at it as saying like, hey, you're trying to chase that last playoff spot, maybe that goes into the calculus of whether or not you go and get a goalie or not. I can also look at it the inverse way, where I say, all right, 12 points right now is what separates the Flyers right now at the 10th worst odds and San Jose at the 2nd worst odds. Again, Chicago's in their own kind of place, and San Jose is starting to fall further into that same realm, where it's like they're going to be in a class of their own in terms of how bad they are. If this team makes a trade, or even if they don't, if they don't, it's bad. But if they don't make a trade and they also don't get a goalie, but they're somehow still within playoff contention, and they go into that month of March, which is an absolute hell month.
Yeah.
If they somehow galvanize and they make a run, for as much as I'm a team, go and get the top pick, if they actively don't do anything to improve the team, and that team somehow goes out and just competes every night, and they pick up the wins, and they make the playoffs, and they go as a hot team, fundamentally, from a long-term view, I hate it. But like at least in terms of like the season itself, it's kind of hard to argue. If they get hot against that set of teams and they go in as a battle-tested group, you would also then presumably be getting top-level goaltending out of 2 of the 3 of Ersin Kolosov and Fedotov, which from a longer-term play is probably also a good thing. So I don't see it. Like I don't see a scenario where the Flyers do nothing at the deadline and somehow still sneak into the playoffs. But weirder things have happened. Like we've seen it. I don't think that the Flyers then go and pull off a round 1 upset. They probably are an easy out, and then we're talking about hockey purgatory again. But
not necessarily an easy out, Russ. They're not the way they play. Like if they play like this and got the extra save, you don't know in a playoff series.
Yeah, then let me rephrase
really
it. Not an easy out. I just mean like a first-round exit. Like I think eventually the playing as a team, there is a lot to be said for it. But when the rubber hits the road in the postseason, yes, there have been complacent teams before, and Tortorella has led an 8 seed to a first-round win. I just don't know if this team has it, but we're very far away from even having to decide if they do or they don't.
20 out of 32 teams are all the same. They're all the same. They're exact same replicas of each other. Right, Anthony? In a sense?
Yeah. I think you could probably say.
Then there's another tier down, and there's another tier down after that.
I think the top 6 in each conference are your contenders, Stanley Cup contenders. I think that there's another that next group maybe isn't 20, Bundy, maybe it's like 16 because there are a few bottom feeders, like really bad bottom feeders. But that next group of 16 teams, you maybe out of that group of 16 have a couple that if they get in the playoffs can pull an upset. Right? They have that ability to knock off a top team just because of the way they play. But of that 16 teams, only 4 of them are going to get in. Right? I mean, literally, you got like 16 teams right now that are right there, and you go, only 4 of you guys are going to get in. We don't know who, but 4 of you are going to get in. The other 12, you'll be picking somewhere between 6 and or 5 and 14 in the draft. That's it. That's what it is. That's the sport this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's early. Like I said, if it is the second half, but it's still a little bit early to really kind of say, all right, who's going for it, who's not.
I got 2 questions that are going to be really, I think, pivotal to the trade deadline.
Yeah.
Morgan Frost and Ristolainen. Like, does there come a point where you say, geez, we can't trade these guys. They're playing too well. That's like, you have to look at Ristol's price right now. Like, he's earning his money right now.
Yes,
where I didn't think he was before, but he is now.
He is, and he should be an attractive asset to any team.
What I'm saying is why? So my point is, Russ, is why do they move him? I mean, has he turned a corner? Does he look like he is? Does Morgan Frost getting almost a point a game over the last how many games it is? Does that change the trajectory of that? Like, what are you going to get for Frost? Because I'm going to be honest with you. He's going to be a point a game player in this league somehow. You watch. He just finds points. And I don't know where they're going to be able to get to offset that. You call me crazy right now, but I'm telling you, check down the standing someday. If he gets a regular shift in this league and finds a happy place, he's getting you 80 points.
I mean, I think the Frost thing is a slightly different conversation just because of the coach and because of how the coach and the player have not worked out to this point. So the question is, do they value as a franchise Morgan Frost longer term? And do they think that he's going to be able to unlock another level? You would think that by now they have enough film and they have enough of a view of him internally that they know what they want to do with the player. Risto, I think, is actually the more interesting one because he's playing the best hockey of his career. Could he have turned a corner? Yes. Is it entirely possible that his play bottoms out next year and then you look like total buffoons for not dealing? Possibly. If they think, go back to my view of what I would like to see this team do, which is get another top pick that you can feel good about and kind of build around, maybe move 1 or 2 of those late first-round picks to try to get other talent in. If you say, look, year 2 of the rebuild ended with a top 7, top 8 pick, maybe you go out and you acquire another player in exchange for some of the other draft capital, and you say year 3 is going to be the first year that we actually do try to compete, well, then you don't trade Risto because you might have fundamentally changed the timeline within your own mind, right? But if they think that year 3 is also going to be rebuild-ish, or we're not ready to go out and either spend in free agency or to get aggressive in trades, then I think it's more of a you're likely to at least entertain trading Risto, if not at the deadline, then certainly in the offseason. Ant, do you view it differently?
No, I really don't. I think that that's a pretty good way of putting it, Russ. And it's the way that I look at Risto is he actually started to show this a little bit last year. Then he got hurt. And I think that had he not gotten hurt, he would have been traded a year ago, because the Flyers on their timeline were still, they didn't look at it as, oh, next year we're contending. They looked at it as we're at least 2 years before we're contenders, or starting to contend. So if he didn't get hurt last year, I think he was definitely getting traded. The fact that he's continued to play that way and on a very consistent level makes you wonder now, is it worth moving him? Because this is a guy who can be maybe part of what we're doing on defense and, can be a foundational piece for us as we start to contend. It's a tough question. It's a good question. And I think it's one that Danny Briere and his team are thinking about, because there's teams that are interested. There's no doubt teams are interested in.
No doubt.
But it's a tough question now. Now you sit there and say, is it worth giving up? The one good thing, if you do trade him, is you probably don't, maybe even a year ago, even if you did trade him, you probably had to eat some of that money. Mm-hmm. Now you probably don't.
Correct. Because
that contract is looked at as a good contract right now for him, right? So you look at it and say, is it worth getting another first-round pick? Because that's probably what you're looking at, right? I mean, if we're being honest, and sit there and go, okay, I now have 4 first-round picks. 3 of them are probably going to be late, but, we're going to have 4. Or is it better to keep the player and have him be a part of what you're doing? Because that other 4th-round pick or the other first-round pick is not a player for you for 4 years, right? So you got to kind of weigh that. Do you have enough draft capital that maybe you sit there and say, we can hold on to him? That's a tough call. I don't know. I don't know what my answer is right now. Let me think about it over the course of the next 6 weeks, see where this team is and if they're right still in the mix or not. But yeah, I think that's a tough decision that Briere has at this point.
Like, I could hit you with a hypothetical here, and I can tell you exactly what would set it up, at least in my mind, for whether or not you trade Risto. A name that has been floated out there as potentially being available in a trade, you're going to have to blow their socks off, is Pettersson, right?
Yeah.
Pettersson's only 26. Would I trade the Edmonton pick, the Colorado pick, whatever you get for Risto, and probably like 2 roster players? Is that too much? Is that not enough? He's a 1C. The guy had a 102-point season, 2 seasons ago? Had 89 points a season ago. It's not like the Canucks have been world beaters, right? He's a very good player. If you were going to say, we think that if we get the 1C in place, we know we have Mishkov, and you're going to use whatever this year's pick could end up being, if it's a high pick, to try to get a guy who is either here next year, the following season. You think that Lutsenko is going to be here. Does trading Risto and using whatever you get back as part of a Pettersson trade, does that change things for you? I would say that would be something that I would be willing to do, because I think Pettersson's ceiling and what he can bring to your team still exceeds what Risto can do. Now, it does create a big hole at your blue line. Like, there's no doubt about that.
And the contract is an issue too.
He makes $12 million, Russ.
$12 million a year. That's an issue. It's a lot.
Why? Well, I mean, you're going to have to eventually pay.
You're going to have to get rid of other salary, though.
Yeah,
like it's more than just moving Risto and say let's bring in Pettersson. Like, there's got to be more to it. They just don't have the room right now to do that. Right now, if you said to me a year from now or a little over a year from now, the same situation, once you're clearing off a lot of the dead money you have on your cap, well, then I think it's a different conversation, right? Then I think that you're probably onto something. But right now, I don't see how it works without getting rid of more salary that maybe you don't want to get rid of.
I guess it depends on who you view. So, like, let's say a Farabee. Like, to me, a Farabee would probably be a roster player that you'd be willing to move. a Risto, if he were dealt in a separate deal and you're not bringing back a bad contract, in theory, that clears another 5. So then you have to clear 2. So where does the other $2 million come from? I don't know. It could be Morgan Frost. Morgan Frost is 2.1. They're at 12. But that's probably 2 separate moves, 3 separate moves. It's really complicated. I'm not saying that it'll happen.
So, yeah, you would have deadline, to make 3 moves and then give up draft capital that you have next year just to get 1 player.
But it is the rare opportunity, though. At the same time,
lot.
We always talk about how 1Cs and top defensemen, number 1 D-men aren't available.
Yeah, but it's a lot. It's a lot
I don't
to do.
think Pedersen's going to get moved at the end of the day. Not right now. I think they're going to let him play his way through this. It's all just speculation, Russ, to be honest with you. It's hard to move a contract like that at the beginning of it. It's a lot of money. So I don't know. I just don't see it happening. Nice to kick tires and spitball ideas on here, but I just don't think Vancouver is going to do that yet because I don't think they even know how to. I don't think they know how to do that yet. So much money.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. I think it's at least a fun hypothetical to think about. It's just that's like I said, he's 26. If he were like 31 or if he were 29, and then you're talking about all right, you have another guy that's going to be in his early 30s when you're ready to flip the switch. It's different. 26 is a totally different thing to me. And it's not like he hasn't had big point seasons before.
Let me take you back a couple seasons. I mean, not it's every year for the last few years, we've heard that Toronto is not going to be able to afford all their big money guys. They're going to have to trade something. They're going to have to trade Mitch Marner. They're going to have to trade William Nylander. They're going to have to, oh my God, might they have to trade Austin Matthews? Or, even now, Tavares is no longer the captain. Maybe they're going to trade Tavares. And yet they've not ever moved any of them. And the reason that they've not moved any of them, not because, that they didn't want to, but rather is it's very difficult to move big contracts like that. It's just very, very hard to do. They've made it work. They found a way to make it work with keeping all those big contracts. I would argue that the reason that they never won anything was because they had all those big contracts and they couldn't improve the areas that they need to improve, which were defense and goaltending. They've done a nice job kind of changing the structure a little bit. Bringing in Berube has made a difference there. And I honestly think that Toronto is no longer a first round out kind of team. Don't know if they're going to get to the final, but I think that they're a tougher out now than they were before. So they've kind of figured it out structurally how to win with the players we have as opposed to trying to force them to play a certain way. So, but it just gets, it's a roundabout way of me saying that we've heard big names like this before and they don't get moved. There's a reason, because it's not an easy transaction.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was saying. It's hard to do.
I hear what you guys are saying. I just counter with creative front offices. Sometimes you figure out a way to make it work. And this to me is like the one exception to the rule. I think you do try to move, maybe not heaven and earth, but you certainly try to make a compelling case. Just looking at the dead money that they have on the cap, they're on the hook for 2.3 on Atkinson this year. That goes down to 1.7 next year. So there's a $600,000 savings. Yeah. Tony DeAngelo's 1.67 comes off the books after this year. So there you go. There's like 2.4. So if you wanted to get creative around the, whether it's between the deadline and the draft, or if it's just around the draft, it's still an interesting topic. You guys are probably right. Ultimately, he probably doesn't get dealt, but the Flyers do have some money that they can make work. Just on fundamentally, is Pettersson a $12 million player to you? I think that's also part of the argument here. Because if Travis Konechny, who's having a really good season, but plays wing, if he's worth almost $9 million a year, and if you gave Owen Tippett $6 million a year, and Tippett is only 1 year younger and also plays on the wing, is Pettersson worth $12 million?
It's because of Canada, Russ. It's because they had to try to keep their star up in Vancouver. Because if he comes to the end of it, he's going to leave and go to an American team. So I believe the Canadian teams, if you have a real superstar, Leon Draisaitl, Connor McDavid, you have to overpay them. There's a tax situation up there that's not conducive to most players. They don't like it. Mm-hmm. They don't like paying all the Canadian taxes on their American salaries. So I think that's the reason you saw those numbers of $12 million for Pettersson and $14 million for Draisaitl. There's a cost of keeping a star player in Canada because not many players actually want to stay in Canada and play. if they're doing that. There's a lot of things, obstacles you have to deal with. The cold, getting in and out of the immigration situation. You got to fly back and forth through customs all the time. So I'm telling you, there's a reason why Canadian teams have to pay their star players more. Anthony, in agreement or disagreement with that?
No, you're spot on, Bundy. There's so many things that we don't think about when it comes to contracts, even for American sport, teams with just American teams, sports with just American teams like football and I know baseball's got one Canadian team and basketball's got one Canadian team, but for the most part, they're all American. Even in those leagues, there are always like little contractual things that the agents and the players and the teams are talking about that we aren't talking about publicly, because it just is. And who knows what it could be? Who knows what a player might want as part of their contract, right? Who knows what kind of situation they want to, there might be, bonus monies and things like that, or, cost of living stuff, whatever. Like there's all kinds of crazy things that are in contracts. Bunny, you've had a contract. They're not like one piece of paper, right? With just you sign your name to it and just says what you're getting paid. It's
right.
Hundreds of pages of stuff right in those contracts.
Yeah, it's a good 30 pages, like all, your team rules and the league rules, abiding by the standards of the team and, all that kind of stuff. The players only want to see the one where their salaries are on and then they sign that one. But that's always how it goes. It's funny. My daughter's fiance, she gets married this summer. He plays in the NFL. And he's been thinking about those things, like, is it where do you go? Where do you get less taxes? Where all these little things come into everybody's mind now. Now, I'm not saying, he's going anywhere or anything, but these are the things that come into a person's crawl space when you're trying to figure these things out. So, he's no different than any NHL player, looking to see if there's somewhere else to go. Do I want to stay here? What's it going to cost him to keep me here? There's all a little bunch of little things involved. And, it's happy for the player at the end of the day when they sign because they're getting some good money. But at the same time, too, there's a lot of emotion that goes into it as well from both the team and the player.
Guys, one other thing that I wanted to get to today is something that we talked about on the Press Row show earlier this week, and that was the fact that the Flyers put out, and NHL.com put out the quarter-century teams. And the Flyers quarter-century teams certainly raised a lot of eyebrows, kind of blew our eyebrows off, to be frank. Mm-hmm. And I gave everybody the homework assignment of let's put together our own teams, and let's see if there's any kind of overlap. Now, again, we did intend on this to originally be a live show, and we were going to kind of field that in the comments. So, again, if you're watching live, by all means, you can drop them in the comments and argue amongst yourselves. We just won't be able to pull them up here because we are operating in the past and you are in the present. But the Flyers released these teams, and they were certainly some head scratchers. And do you want to give people an idea of what your biggest qualm with the Flyers quarter-century
my
were?
biggest?
I'll bring them up here on the screen.
Yeah. My biggest qualm. I have a few, but my biggest is Ivan Provorov as the second team defenseman. I think they got it right with Desjardins and Tiemann at the top. I think those are the two you go.
Totally agree.
Right.
Totally agree.
Those two they got right. I'm good with Pronger being on the list, even though he only played 2 and a little bit of a third season with the team. He was that much of a difference maker. He was a captain. I think that there in the last 25 years, I'd be hard pressed to find somebody more valuable to the team in one season than Chris Pronger was to that 2009-2010 Flyers team. And so I'm good with him being there. I don't know how you left Braden Coburn off and put Provorov. Just don't. I don't see it. I could come up with a few defensemen that I would put ahead of Ivan Provorov, including one guy on this show I would put ahead of Ivan Provorov on this list. It befuddles me that guy was put onto this list. It's almost an embarrassment that he was put onto this list.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have a playoff war. I mean, you got to have establish yourself in a playoff series for you to get on a list like that. Like everybody else has more for probably a lot more for their playoff heroics than anything else. But I like Mike Richards and Jeff Carter. Jeff Carter wasn't on it, right?
No, it was not.
No,
he was
Carter
not.
wasn't
I'm
on
sorry.
at all.
It was Richards, right?
Let me throw both of the teams up on the screen really quick for those who might have somehow missed it.
Well, you can see it at the bottom. We can read it at the bottom.
I'm saying even for the people who are listening in the podcast that won't have the benefit of seeing it. First team was Desjardins, Gagne, Giroux, Richards, Timonen, Cechmanek. And then the second team, where Ant has the real issue, is Pronger, Briere, Couturier, Voracek, Provorov, and Boucher.
There wasn't another goalie better than Boucher.
There is, and that's my second major issue. It's Steve Mason should be on there instead of Boucher. Mason had 5 solid years here.
Yeah, and I got Wayne Simmons on there ahead of either Mike Richards or Jake Voracek. So
I actually have Simmons on my first team. I would put Simmons on the first team, and I would drop Richards to the second team.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know why Simmer. I mean, he exemplified exactly what every Flyer was like. I don't know. We spoke this the other day. Danny Briere had a couple of mediocre regular seasons, but he had that great playoff that year. Where he was led the league in points and stuff with the Ville Leno line and stuff. So I get that. Coots, understandably so. He won a Selke Trophy. Voracek had close to 100 points one year. I mean, the problem is it's hard to lock that guy in stone where you say, okay, who is absolutely in stone? And for me, it would be Desjardins and Timonen would be absolutely locked in stone, and Giroux.
Yeah, and I think Gagne too.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I have a different view of Gagne than everybody. Like I remembered him as a great player, like a really good hockey player, but no different than a Mark Recchi. Like he fell in the same stratosphere as Mark Recchi.
But I think Recchi, the best of Recchi was prior to 2000 with the Flyers. His his second time here, he was good, but he wasn't like, oh my God, off the page good, right?
And then if there's no 2010, coin flip miracle run, who knows what that list would look like, right? Because those guys are essentially on it because there's no playoff runs for those guys. That was it. There's a lot of other guys. You go back to Desjardins, you could say this guy's played tons of hockey in the playoffs in the spring. But some of these guys don't have a whole lot of playoff games to add to their repertoire in terms of playing long series year after year.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Listen,
right.
There's
not a great list.
There's another glaring omission, and I get why he's left off just because of the legal troubles. But like Carter Hart probably would have been one of the goalies.
Probably.
We have to be fair. Like now, whether or not he was an absolute stud of a netminder, I don't know. But to me, like I would have put Carter Hart on there over Brian Boucher. And I think that you certainly could make the case that Steve Mason could have been on there over Brian Boucher.
Well, it just shows you the lack of goaltending this team's had for 25 years.
Correct.
I mean, the fact that if you would have came out to me and said, Bundy, we need you to give us the 2 goaltenders for your 25-year team, I don't even know if I would have remembered Cechmanek. That's how bad it is. Like, I mean, I'm like thinking to myself, really? That's what we had at number 1 was Cechmanek.
And intern Andrew suggested Marty Biron.
I remember Cechmanek quitting on us in a Buffalo series. Had a plane ticket home. I mean, really? That's the number 1 quarter century guy? Had a fucking plane ticket home in the first round. There's the F-bomb. I'm going to say it again. He had a fucking plane ticket to go home at the end of the regular season before the playoffs started. We had a real good playoff run that year, I can assure you of it.
So good.
We gave the double Bundy bomb.
Double
that
bomb.
Actually got that deserved.
Yeah, thinking about that more. I tell you what, I can get myself heated in a matter of 5 seconds when I think back of stuff. And I thought about it, I'm like, wait a minute. Really? This is what we're fucking doing? Like, this is what we're doing.
Oh,
does anyone else remember that? I mean, there's guys that called the list, by the way. Don't they not remember the guy had a flight home? He didn't even want to be here. Number 1 goalie, quarter century team. Amen. All right. What's next, Russ?
Well, so, I mean, did you guys come up with, like, do you want to go through who you would have swapped out?
I mean, I already, teams? Yeah, I mean, look, I have an honorable mention. And my honorable mention lists are, Forsberg. If you're going to put Pronger, you can consider Forsberg, right? And Roenick. and Primo and Matt
Primo
Carl.
for sure.
Yeah,
Primo.
I mean, the same.
Primo was my big problem. I actually think that there was a case to be made that Primo could have been on the first team, not even just as
you can make an argument for Primo, but then who are you taking off?
Off of the first team?
I don't know. You got to be careful what you say here, Russ.
Yeah.
You know what I would have rather, guys? I'm going to be honest with you, okay? I'll say this. What they should have done was not pick a wing, center wing. They should have just picked 3 forwards on each team.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because you've screwed up your list by doing it this way. They should have just did 3 forwards and 4 defensemen total, which is what they did. But the forwards, I don't like the way the pecking order. The more I look at it and think about it, it's too neat. It's not supposed to be neat. This is just too clean. Like there needs to be more looked into it in terms of the end of the day. I don't know. You know what? I guess everybody had to put a team out. So congratulations to everybody who's on it. But there's a lot of guys that were left off it. Keith Primo almost won a Stanley Cup by himself.
Yeah.
You know, those are big. There's some massive playoff teams, like series that some of these players that are not on the list have gone through that some players on this list haven't. So, you know, that's my only issue with it.
Am I crazy for thinking there was just a lot of recency bias here? And like, I mean, you would expect that Giroux would be on there. You would expect that, and like I think that there's maybe a little bit more respect there in the first team, right? Because Gandhi didn't play here particularly recently. We know what Richards was part of, and
there's 12 players. There's 12 players that are on these 2 teams, first and second team. Yeah. Only 3 from the first half of the 25 years. Only 3.
Yeah.
All the rest are the last 15 years, 10, 15 years. Right?
God, I would love, you know what I love though when you say that? Like you take that 2000, I would love to have seen the 2000 team play the 2010 team. Like I would love to have seen how that stuff works itself out.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
it's night and day. That 2000 team should have won a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I know.
I think the 2004 team, had they not had defensive injuries, would have won a Stanley Cup or could have won.
Or trading defensemen away at the deadline.
Well, that was a problem too, right, Bundy?
That didn't help. Yeah,
didn't help.
Me and Eric Weinrich.
Yeah. So like I look at that and I say,
oh well,
those teams were much closer to being Stanley Cup caliber than even the team that went to the final in 2010.
Yeah, I totally agree. The 2010 thing was a hockey miracle gifted by the hockey gods, and they gave the Flyers a run that only went so far, but it was damn close, and it was a lot of fun.
It was
and
fun.
There were some guys on that team that developed their name in those playoff series. Because when you look about it after that, there wasn't another run after that for years.
No, I mean, they had the one thing in 12 where they beat Pittsburgh in that crazy series, and then they lost to the Devils, right? But that's it. Other than that, they haven't won. Won a series.
Can we play a hypothetical here? Because at the beginning of the show, we're talking about, you know, if you make it into the playoffs, and the way that they would have to make it into the playoffs this year is they'd have to get really hot goaltending and really strong play in March against very tough teams. How does this team stack up? Like, let's just say hypothetically they don't make any roster changes, but they do get good goaltending down the stretch. They have a very strong March. How does this team stack up to that 2010 team that went on the Stanley Cup final run? Like, to me, it's not even close, but if your whole idea is you just have to get in, and if you get in, anything can happen.
Well, I mean, I think anything can happen, Ross, because let's imagine they get in, right? Let's say this Flyers team gets in. Mm-hmm. If you're playing Washington in the first round, is that like you sit there and go, oh, they're going to blow out the Flyers?
No, that's a winnable series.
Right?
Yeah.
So, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, you look at it and say that they can win that series, you know? Like, even Toronto. I mean, you saw how they played against Toronto. I mean, Toronto probably wins the series.
Toronto should win that series.
But it's not a blowout. I don't think it's a blowout.
Yeah.
No, I don't either. Russ, I'm telling you, they're a little closer than you think. They're a little bit closer than you think than where they are. Not in terms of winning the cup, but of winning a round. It's not out of the possibility. I'm telling you, the way they're playing and the way they're structurally sound.
Mm-hmm. They need a goalie.
Yeah, I know. I'm with you, Anthony. I'm with you.
That's the problem.
Or they need one of
the.
One, or they just need to go down to 2 like a normal team, and
it doesn't matter.
Send the AHL. Well, I'm just saying, like, you never know what happens if a goalie can get hot. I don't think Fedotov is like a dog shit player. I fundamentally disagree with the notion that he can't be an NHL backup. They went into the season believing that Ersson could be a number 1. He's had 3 lower body injuries that have kind of derailed the season. I'm willing to give him a chance again next year to be the number one, Kolosov belongs in the AHL. Anytime that Kolosov starts between now and the end of the season, barring injury, is a wasted start to me.
I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up back in the AHL very soon.
Okay.
But I think it's just get to the point where, I think they're trying to get through January, making sure Urshan doesn't hurt himself again, right? And then I think you might see Kolosov go down there to play.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else you guys want to get to today?
Nope.
Well, it was a good show.
Look at us. Hey,
Got a lot
look at
done.
us. We did.
And our new show is going to, our regular time, which we will announce later, but it is going to be on Tuesdays, and it will be from the studio, right?
Correct.
Correct, yes. Tuesdays in the studio.
Which is going to be nice. Because as much as we like doing this from home, although we haven't really done that many this season, there is something to be said for higher production value and still being able to say everything that we want to say on the show. So we're looking forward to provide. I mean, in fairness, and this goes all the way back to like when you and I first started the show in 2018, right?
Yeah.
We have never in the history of the show had a consistent day. There was like there have been a couple of stretches where it's like, all right, let's do Wednesdays. There have been a few stretches over the years where it's been like, let's do a Friday. But this is the first time that we're actively committing to trying to do a consistent day. All it took was, the team actually putting the studio together for us to do.
Well, it took them to do that and actually provide us with the tech work, the technicians that are necessary to make that happen. So, because we are committed to that,
somebody to man the board as well.
We have committed. We've committed to their time, so they have to commit. So, I mean, they've committed to our time, so we have to commit to theirs.
Something like that, yeah.
Yes.
All right, if you haven't done so already, do us a favor. Go subscribe to Snow the Goalie on YouTube. Like the video, share the video, and subscribe. And I know that despite the fact that I say that, not everybody likes the video and shares the video and subscribes. Some of you do 2 of the 3. Some of you do 1 of the 3. If there's any of you that do 0 of the 3 and you watch this show consistently, what are we doing? Anyway, if you can, like the video, YouTube likes that. Share the video, share it to a friend, or share it to your spouse who's never going to watch it. Doesn't matter. YouTube also likes that. Subscribe, obviously, because that just helps us out. If you like listening in the podcast feed better, we are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. If you want, you can do both. You can subscribe on YouTube, and you can subscribe to the podcast feed. You can watch half the show and listen to half the show. You can watch the whole thing and then go back and listen to it. You can listen first and then watch the looks on our faces as we break down the Philadelphia Flyers. But in the meantime, this has been Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast. Follow Bundy over on Twitter at Therien6, and on Twitter at SanFilippo. I'm on Twitter at JoyOnBroad. You can also follow the show on TikTok, as long as it lives, Instagram, Facebook, X, and wherever you get your podcasts. Until, when's the next day, guys? Is it Monday is the game, or is it Tuesday is the home game? Which day is it?
Well, there's Tuesday's the game. So we have, Russ, we go back and forth. Oh.
I will be wearing long johns to that game, gentlemen. Did you see the weather?
Yes. Weather's on
like
Tuesday is going to be
right?
Get your long johns out.
The high is going to be like 17, and then like at night it's going to be like 8.
And what was the name of the guy who like lived in Veterans Stadium?
Yeah, you remember him? He wrote a book about it. I forget what his name.
Yeah, I forget what his name was, but like he set up in like one of the storage rooms or whatever, and like had electricity and everything like running to it, and he just lived in the vet. That's going to be me on Tuesday. I'm not driving back home in between doing the show and then doing Press Row show that night. There's just no way.
Oh, I am, but you're welcome to come with me.
I can come with you, or
unless we can do it before the show. Can we do that? I mean,
you mean do it before the game?
Yeah, like show up a little bit earlier.
We'd have to talk to them. We already have it locked in for the time that they have someone available.
I guess in theory we could. Well, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And now I'm sure they're going to be thrilled to hear this at the end of the episode and try to, that's going
to. No, it's all good. I'm not worried. Whatever it is, we'll do whatever they want. Not worried. No worries.
Sounds good. All right. Anyway, thanks for listening to Snow the Goalie. We'll talk to all of you very early next week with a regular episode and the Press Row show. Until then, enjoy your hockey. Have a great weekend.